All right, you guys, today we are back with Maya, and I am super excited to talk with you guys about the Gemini moon. So, if you have this natally in your chart, this video is for you. We're going to be discussing what it was like to grow up with a mom who had this kind of energy that brought about the Gemini moon in your chart, what that means for you, and some solutions to any imbalances that this can cause in your life. So I feel very connected to a Gemini moon as a Gemini sun. I have, my ex was a Gemini moon, one of my really good friends, and then my brother, who I'm very close with. So I'm very familiar with this type of energy and kind of how it comes about. And one of the things that I typically notice with someone with a Gemini moon is that they will grow up in a somewhat unstable environment. And so the moon is typically representing the mother. So there is something unstable or unavailable about the presence of the mother. And it doesn't have to mean that the mom is mentally really unstable, but she will tend to have a more nervous energy or at least some type of situation in her life that brings about anxiety and distractedness. And so the child can feel her absence or her lack of presence and awareness in the moment. And this can become internalized into the way that they operate their life. So when I think of a Gemini mom, I think of someone who is very analytical and maybe not as emotionally in tune with what's going on inside themselves. So they might kind of tackle the world through more of like the data or more through the facts rather than what they're feeling and intuitively kind of moving from there. It doesn't mean that they're not going to be a nurturing mom. It just means that their personality and their approach is coming through a much more fact-oriented lens rather than through what they want to emotionally experience in the moment. So they can be analytical, emotionally unavailable, and anxious. And they typically have a lot going on. So these are going to be moms that maybe have two jobs, or they have lots of kids, or lots of responsibilities, or maybe they're always on the phone. They kind of give off this energy of being really, really busy. And so what typically happens is that this then transfers over to the child. So as you grow up, and your mom is like this, you become kind of like that. So maybe you're somebody who always likes to have something going on, like a new project, a new thing to look forward to, or you have a lot of responsibilities or tasks or things on your to-do list that kind of keeps you uh, just always going. It has this kind of like frenetic, chaotic type of energy to it, at least internally, and maybe not externally all the time. Maybe you come across as calm, but internally, there's a lot of thoughts always going. It's like your mind never ceases. You never just kind of relax into the moment. And so this can tend to create more anxiety or people who overthink. I mean, it depends on other aspects, but there could be sort of this like obsessive quality to thinking or having trouble letting go of certain thoughts or certain things that are running through your mind. And just the energy again can be quite like anxious. So I think it's one of the things to be aware of is your nervous system in the moment, because obviously stress does lead to certain health conditions. The moon is associated with the body and the physical health. So there can be certain conditions that arise because of nervousness. So whatever that looks like for you, just kind of tuning into your body and maybe knowing if something is coming from stress and from the mind rather than from an actual imbalance in the body. And so these people are going to maybe also have trouble processing emotion. So just like your mom was analytical, you also tend to view things analytically. And this can give you great understanding of yourself. You can kind of look at yourself in a detached way, process things, understand things about yourself. But it doesn't mean that you're feeling them. You're kind of observing, you're noticing, you're making certain arguments or notions out of what you're seeing, but you might not actually like sit and just feel the emotion in the moment. And so this again is your way of maybe avoiding things at times through this busyness or through this kind of detached, more analytical state of mind. So you might also be prone to numbing out, things like drugs or alcohol or just generally other distractions can be other forms of uh, kind of dealing with the busyness of your mind, and as well as the difficulty you might face in trying to just sit with emotion. So it's like you have so much going on up there that in order to deal with it and to cope, you find these outlets in your life that kind of release it or allow you to step out of yourself. So that's why I think exercise can be really beneficial for people like this, or even any kind of like spiritual development that keeps you really, really present, but also not in the mind as much. I think those are a very unique, that's a very unique kind of situation that comes with connecting with the body. So I think that could be really helpful for people like that. Gemini moons also can be quite social, but what I've noticed is that actually a lot of the Gemini moon people I know have smaller circles. So they are not necessarily somebody who has like 1,000,001 friends, but the friends that they do have, they're really quick-witted around. They're really funny around. They're like the life of the party in a lot of ways. So once you feel comfortable, it's like you're willing to open up and just share this really kind of buoyant and fun, like childlike kind of personality. You can get silly, you can get playful, and you might really enjoy like learning and trying lots of new things, which is really exciting. Also, something about Gemini though is that they tend to be quite changeable. So sometimes this can equate to people maybe having unstable emotions, in the sense that one second you might be really childlike and having fun and being playful, and then like something else happens and you, on the like drop of a hat, you feel somber or irritated or not in a good mood anymore. So I had definitely have noticed a level of like irritability if someone is on the, maybe having a bad day, or on like the lower spectrum of Gemini, the lower vibration, I mean. So you kind of have the full gambit that you can feel emotionally. So the moon, did you want to say anything before I continue on, Maya? I know I'm just like rambling.
I have a lot of thoughts on what you're saying. Yeah, I'm gonna chime in and then let's go from there. So
Awesome.
the first thing I just want to make clear, and maybe everyone understands this, but you're talking about a kid with a Gemini moon will have a mother who is this way, not the mother has the Gemini moon.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Okay.
your mom would be like that, or you would perceive her like that, and then you internalize that and become like that too.
Because you have the Gemini moon. Got
Yes.
it. Okay, I
Yes.
just wanted to make sure that was clear. So the first thing that I wanted to say is that when we're babies, this is interesting. So when we're babies, something that we really, really need, like a really essential part of our development, is we really need firm holding and containment and presence and stillness from our mother. We need her to hold us close to her chest. We need her to look at us and be present with us and not be busy doing other things, and also not be busy going somewhere in her mind. We really need her there with us, holding us firmly with containment and presence. And so, like, it makes so much sense, because a child who doesn't get that will, in psychology perspective, will turn into an adult who really has a fear of being still and of sitting in silence and being really present. And so it's interesting that the mother would, with this Gemini moon, that you're saying the mother has this problem with being still and being present. And so therefore, if a mother has that problem, there probably wasn't this firm holding, containment, and presence. And so that is also what contributes to this child growing up into an adult who has trouble being still. And so, like, to feel our feelings, you were talking about Gemini moons also have this problem with feeling their feelings. They're very good at analyzing it, which is important, and observing themselves, that's important too. But the feeling our feelings is equally important, if not more important. And to feel our feelings, it takes presence, it takes stillness, it takes time, it takes dedication, and it takes just this kind of like surrender into the moment and into our bodies. And that's what tends to be, from what I'm hearing, really hard and scary for people who have this Gemini moon. And so really what I'm hearing is that the thing that's needed here is a practice. And the reason I call it practice is like, it takes time and it takes effort to learn how to sit still, to train your body not to be scared of the emptiness, the spaciousness that is in that stillness. And that's going to be what is required to feel our feelings. And that's going to be kind of like the antidote to the like constant anxiety that this person is feeling, is really that stillness. And consciously, I think people believe that that anxiety might go up in that stillness, and it will for a moment, but that's also where the anxiety gets to go away. And if we don't give ourselves that stillness, then that anxiety is going to be constant. So yes, it might go up for a moment, and that's where you get to feel the feelings and just be with it and not judge it and not run from it. And then it's going to start to dissipate as you just give yourself some like breath and beingness. And there was one other thing I wanted to comment on that you said. I'm trying to remember. Did I write it down? Oh, you were talking about the potential for irritability with people with a Gemini moon. And if you think about it, like if we're filled with anxiety and we have no practice to let that anxiety be felt and moved through us and to be in stillness, we have so much energy moving through us. We have so much going on in our minds that any little thing is likely to irritate us. And so again, it's that stillness, that spaciousness, that slowing down that's going to help with the irritability as well.
I can relate to this so much. I mean, I know I just have a Gemini sun, but I feel this way all the time. And if I create an environment and a level of busyness in my life where things feel really urgent and I have to get them done in a really short amount of time, which I always tend to do, I just get this crazy level of like road rage and this irritability that comes that I think surprises people because I'm so chill when you hang out with me. But when I feel this urgency, it's like everyone and everything feels like it's getting in the way. And so that's when that irritability comes up a lot. It's like, I think it's very obvious when you feel that just frenetic energy inside. It's like all your cells are bouncing off of each other and it feels like it's going to explode, like it needs some kind of outlet. And maybe that is one of the outlets, but it's obviously an unhealthy one because then it can impact your relationships negatively.
Yeah. And even you said like exercise is a good outlet, all these things. And yes, 100%, like exercise, walking, going in the ocean, whatever it is to kind of like release this energy. And at the same time, those things we've talked about this are still doing. And really what we want this person to do is to stop doing. So
Yeah.
even the going for a run, even the going to the gym, even though they're healthy coping mechanisms and encouraged, before doing those things, there still has to be the stillness, or after doing those things, there still has to be the stillness, because the running is still an avoidance of the stillness, right? So it doesn't take the place of the nothingness that has to happen for these people. And I think a lot of times people think that the going to the gym or the running or whatever it is like the slowness or the stillness that they need, but it doesn't replace it. And I think that's an important point.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that because I mean, obviously I'm really identifying with this moon sign, even though I have something else. But I did notice that when I was going through a hard time and experiencing a lot of anxiety and just way too much in my mind, I would go work out very intensely for hours. And sometimes it would help, but a lot of the times I would still leave feeling irritable. And then, you do a 15-minute meditation and you're really doing nothing. And that can have more power to transform your inner state than those 2 hours. So I definitely have experienced that firsthand. And I'm so glad that you said that so that people can really hear what they truly need. And it's usually the more difficult thing.
It is. And like, it can be meditation, but I don't even like to call it meditation because that alone like deters people. It's like, you can literally just lay on the grass, lay on the floor and just stare at the sky, or just focus on breathing in and breathing out, or focus on the discomfort of not doing anything. Even that's beneficial. It's just about doing nothing.
Yes, absolutely.
No podcast, no nothing.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
so hard for me. I even fall asleep listening to like pick a card readings and stuff. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but yeah, I think that's super helpful. I guess the next thing I would say is talking about emotions. I don't know if I mentioned this, but the moon is, of course, how we process our emotions. And Gemini, being an analytical, talkative sign, would really benefit from sharing their ideas and their experiences and their feelings with other people in order to better understand themselves. I do feel like these people will have realizations about how they feel in a conversation. I will say though that I notice that a lot of Gemini moons, or at least the ones I know, actually don't talk about their emotions that much. There is quite a bit of avoiding, but I think that if they actually allow themselves to discuss it, or at least to journal, I notice that the ones that do journal or open up at least have kind of the best way that they, or this is one of the best ways that they can actually start to process things. So I would definitely recommend that. Um, and then I think another thing I would talk about is just what makes them feel secure. And I think that what I've seen so far is that because they are so quick-witted and social as an air sign, what part of what makes them feel secure is this sense of connection or community and people enjoying their humor, like people actually kind of reflecting back to them, and maybe even holding space in a way for what their mind can process. Another thing that I see is that they tend to feel more secure when they have something that they're looking forward to, something that they are planning for, kind of like a little bit more future oriented in terms of, what new thing can I experience? What other change is happening in my life? Like, am I going to move? Am I going to buy a car? Like always something refreshing to kind of clean the palette in a way. And so I think that that's actually what that stimulation makes them feel really safe, makes them feel really good because it's representing, I believe, kind of that familiar feeling of changeability that they experience with the mother. And so I would recommend, if they have a partner, to make sure that you are with someone who keeps things fresh and alive, because this is one of your core needs as an individual. And yes, we want to help create more balance with you by having space and nothingness, but you're not just going to change who you are. Like, it's not just going to go away. You're always going to be someone who desires these fluctuations or these alterations in your life. And so I would recommend having some kind of partner or friendships or job that keeps you on your toes, that keeps your life fresh, because stagnation is also one of the fears of a Gemini moon. And it for stillness is good, but stagnation is bad. So I think that's also something really helpful to kind of check in with yourself. Am I feeling this anxiety and this restlessness because I'm not growing anymore, which is, something beneficial to look at? Or is it because I'm always looking for the grass being greener on the other side? I think there's like a really fine line between that to kind of toe. Is there anything you would want to say about that, Maya?
I was just going to say the same thing, that that's a really hard line to figure out. Am I just like searching for the next thing, or am I actually feeling stagnant and it's time for growth? And this is something I've had to work on so much in my life. I mean, the grass is greener is a huge part of like my wounding and everything, and I think for a lot of people, that's a huge thing. And so the way that I've started to kind of figure out where that line is the feeling that comes into my body, which is why it's important to be in touch with our emotions in our body. The feeling that comes into my body that drives me to want it. So the grass is greener kind of feeling, just change for change and whatever, is usually driven by a feeling of like anxiety, or what's the word? Uh, impulsivity,
Hmm.
or what I notice in myself is usually that grass is greener drive is when I have needs of my own that I'm not meeting. So usually if I have needs that I'm ignoring or not meeting, I'll go into this like need for change, grass is greener kind of energy. And
Mm.
it feels anxious. It feels a little bit impulsive. It feels a little bit manic in my body. So if we can identify the energy that we're going into the need for change with, I think we can decipher between the two. Now, if we're really feeling stagnant, there's almost like this feeling of like lull and a knowingness, like a gentle, soft knowingness that something needs to change. And usually it's not this rushed kind of feeling. It's this feeling of, okay, I'm ready for something different. And instead of trying to search for what that different thing is impulsively, you're just kind of like opening yourself for it to come to you. There's this trust there that, okay, it's time for me to change. And I'm trusting that it's going to become clear what that change is, and I'm leaving myself open to that. And when it feels clear, I'll take the action. So there's more of a calm knowingness in that way of change.
Okay, this is helpful. I have one question that's kind of related to something I feel like I'm going through. This might be hard for you to answer, so it's okay if you don't really have something coming to mind. But how would you describe the feeling of impulsiveness? Like, how do you recognize that this is me being impulsive versus excitement and, you know, like, I don't know, needing that
Yeah.
next step? Yeah.
Yeah. Such a good question. So I believe that impulsivity is a lack of trust. So if we feel like we have this idea and we get excited about it, which is good and healthy, and we need to act on it now, it's like we don't trust that we can make it happen if we give it more time, or that it will still come if we give it more time, or that we will even want it anymore if we give it more time, like there's this lack of trust. And so your question was, what does it feel like? What does impulsivity feel like? Yeah. So to me, impulsivity feels like this rushed feeling that like, okay, let me start within the body. It feels like this like tightening in the chest and throat a little bit, and this like heightened adrenaline. Like, what heightened adrenaline feels like in your body? It feels like this
Yeah.
heightened adrenaline where actually it feels like your mind can't really think and plan straight. It's just like on autopilot. And it can actually get a lot done in that autopilot. Like you can book flights, you can, whatever it is that you feel like you want to change, it's actually very efficient, but it's like there's a fog to it. There's a you got taken over by something kind of feeling to impulsivity. You know what I'm talking about?
I think I'm going through this literally right now. Like, as we're talking, I'm preparing kind of this podcast studio setup that I've had an idea about somewhat recently. And I have two podcast guests tomorrow. So I'm like, I need to go get mics. I need to do this. And it's quite a bit of money. I haven't really thought about the financial impact of it. I'm just like, I need to go do it. And I feel like my brain can't think about anything else until this is solved.
Yeah.
It feels like it's taking up the complete view of my vision. And so, yeah, I definitely feel that urgency. I'm feeling all the things that you're talking about. Yeah.
Urgency is a good word. That is how it feels in the body. And I just believe that oftentimes when we act from urgency and impulsivity, it either leads us to a place of not following through later on because we weren't 100% sure and we didn't go about it in like a sustainable way, or to disappointment because we didn't think things through, or to I don't want to say bad things happening, but things that could have been avoided.
Yeah.
And getting ourselves into situations that we don't want to be in. I just think impulsivity is a lack of trust. And when we operate from a lack of trust, the outcome, the match to lack of trust, the energetic vibrational match to lack of trust, isn't something amazing.
Yeah. That's such a good point. Yeah. And it's something that's so, like you said, it takes over so much that the awareness is difficult to find, the perspective. And I think that's why Sagittarius, being the opposite sign of Gemini, can be really beneficial, because Sagittarius is all about the larger perspective. It's ruled by Jupiter, so it can see well into the future. It can see how it fits into the past and what the purpose is, and if it's in line with your integrity and your morals and what you're doing by doing this thing. And so Gemini can be quite driven by the more mundane type of mind, the more daily type of actions. And so it can disconnect you from the bigger why and the bigger purpose. And so I think that's why it's so helpful to try to balance with the opposite sign, like we were talking about before we hopped on the call.
Yeah. So I think it's about when you're making a change or you're wanting to do something new, great, but take a second and be with it and find where the seed is coming from. Is it from anxiety, impulsivity, or is it from this knowingness? And if you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to let this marinate for 5 days, 3 days, and there's a resistance to that, there's probably impulsivity involved. But if you say to yourself, I'm going to let this marinate for a little bit, and it's like, okay, I trust that the answer will come. There you go. Time for change.
Definitely. Okay. This is super helpful. Okay. The last two things I want to talk about are just how sometimes I notice like Gemini moons, they're very humorous. Like they're very like wise and funny and just so intelligent. But sometimes they will use this without maybe even realizing it because they respond so quickly. It's almost like word vomit. And they will use this jokes and things like that as sarcasm. And it will kind of, I know sometimes it can be like a little bit biting, like it can sometimes hurt the people around them. And I don't know where that's coming from exactly, if it's something that, if it's like their coping style, or if there's an issue that they haven't addressed. And so they like let the humor out to kind of get to it. But I've definitely noticed that sometimes Gemini moons can be very funny, and sometimes it can just hurt people. At least maybe not all of them, but I think the ones that are maybe experiencing a moment of less consciousness, that tends to happen.
Yeah, it sounds like, I feel like that would happen as a result of a lack of presence in a way. Because if you're just fully present, you can really read people and the situation. And if there's a lack of presence, that's not really happening. And so if there's this inability or lack of reading the people in the situation, then I think that word vomit can come out, hurting someone accidentally, whatever it is, what you're talking about. And so it sounds like that comes from that inability to be present.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. The last thing I'll say is that I do think that Gemini moons benefit from having a significant amount of time alone. And I think that this is just because they have so much going on in their mind. It's like they need that time alone to even like sift through all the different thoughts and kind of understand what they're experiencing. So that would be my last recommendation, is to make sure that you honor that, because I think that otherwise it can be this build up. Even if you're not doing nothingness, if you're trying to like understand something or process something, it's like you do really need time alone in order to have clarity and awareness around what's going on. So yeah, is there anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
I feel like just to comment on what you're saying there is that I'm wondering if like people with a Gemini moon, they know they need this time alone, and actually when they take it, it feels good, but it might be, you can answer this better probably, but it might be difficult to actually take it because of this need for busyness and a full schedule and the doing. And so it's really coming back to like integrity with yourself and love for yourself to give yourself that time alone and give yourself that space. Because again, like, even though it's probably known that it's needed, it can get put on the back burner, I think, because of that need for busyness.
Yeah. Yeah. My brother, for example, has so many planets in Scorpio. So he definitely craves a lot of time alone. But then I have another friend who has a Gemini moon, and he will do anything to have people around him and not be alone. And so I think it kind of depends on people's chart, whether or not they carve out time for it. But I think regardless, Gemini moon people will always find that they have a lot of competing priorities. And so it's just making sure that this isn't something that suffers as a consequence of that, I think is so important. But this has been really enlightening, Maya. You always have so many useful things to add for everyone and definitely for me. Maya is actually my coach. I don't know what word to call you.
Coach is fine.
My
I
mental
know
coach.
it's so confusing to find a word that fits what actually happens in the sessions.
Yeah, she draws on so many different practices, from somatic healing to like talk therapy to I mean, you've even had experience in medicinal, you know, herbs and things like that. So yeah, Maya is amazing. I highly recommend working with her. I work with her all the time. So where can people reach out to you if that's something that they're interested in? What do you offer?
Yeah. So right now my offerings are one-on-one sessions. That's where I'm at right now. I'm working on cultivating some more things, but one-on-one sessions. So individual or couples. I love doing couples work as well. And the best way to reach out to me is email. So Maya, Maya, Nicole, Nicole, healing@gmail.com. So you can reach out to me, and I do a free phone 20-minute consultation for us to connect, and I can, get a feel for you and hear what's going on and give you some feedback, and then we would schedule from there.
Yay. Awesome. Thank you so much, Maya. And of course, if
Thank
you
you.
want an astrology reading, you can check it out, willsboom.com. And I hope you guys have a great day. Bye.
Bye.